Throughout history, the passing of a monarch or queen has been met with a range of norms and etiquette, shaped by various factors surrounding the event. Different nations embraced distinct customs, and each monarch held unique views on the treatment of their remains. Some were held in high esteem, while others were cast aside. Join us as we look at the chilling death masks of English kings and queens. Henry VII. Henry VII passed away on April 21, 1509, following a prolonged illness that began in the spring of 1507, during which he endured a serious throat condition. The king was reported to have been enduring acute rheumatic fever for a considerable period, alongside bouts of despondency and a diminished appetite. In the early days of 1509, it was believed that he was suffering from tuberculosis. On the eve of his passing, his confessor was called to administer the final rites. In the care of other members of Henry VII's household, he was attended to, while John Fisher, who would later become the martyred Bishop of Rochester, chronicled the events of his final days. It was remarked that the king passed away in a manner befitting a devout Christian. His final days marked not by tranquility, but by a fervent mix of confession, prayer, and the unburdening of Henry VII's emotions. He wept incessantly, taking the sacrament of penance with profound compassion, his tears flowing freely as he grieved and sobbed for a full 3/4 of an hour. Henry VII had then made his preparations for death. On the day of his departure, he attended Mass in honor of the Magnificent Virgin, the Mother of Christ, to whom he had always held a unique and specific devotion. He gazed upon the image of the crucifix with profound reverence throughout the day, lifting his head as high as possible, raising his hands in supplication, often embracing and kissing it, striking his breast with deep devotion. Who would imagine that this was anything less than perfect faith? It is possible that in his moment of hesitation, he lacked the full conviction that the Almighty God's ear was attentive to him, poised to hear his plea for forgiveness. Henry VII was tormented, not by the specter of death, but by the looming presence of Almighty God's judgment. He felt a deep concern and unease about the fate of his soul following death. He begged for mercy, yet in those fleeting moments, it arrived unexpectedly. He succumbed to tuberculosis, a dreadful affliction, leaving the throne to his eldest surviving son, Henry VIII. The reign of Henry VIII would alter the course of history, yet following his passing, the body of Henry VII lay at Richmond Palace for a time as the funeral arrangements were prepared. He was subsequently embalmed, and in due course, the death mask of the first Tudor king would be created. A death mask is a cast, either in wax or plaster, created from the face of a notable individual following their passing, serving as a tribute to the deceased. The death mask of the first Tudor king was created prior to his funeral, probably during the embalming procedure. Nonetheless, it played an essential role, as it provides a glimpse into the appearance of Henry VII during his later years. The death mask served as the foundation for his burial effigy, portraying a figure seated upright, characterized by short, neatly trimmed black hair, prominent eyes, and a mouth firmly closed. The portrayal reveals the king's irregular features and stern demeanor. It is believed that the effigy was created from the death mask, and that it rested atop the coffin during its journey to Westminster Abbey, where he was interred within the grand and magnificent Lady Chapel he had commissioned as a venue for royal funerals. The death mask was crafted to serve as a component of the funeral effigy, resting atop Henry's casket. Countless Londoners stood in awe as they beheld their king's last visage, embodied in the wooden figure that graced the horse-drawn hearse. For the first time, many individuals in London were introduced to their king, a rarity during the Tudor period when it was uncommon for the populace to even have a glimpse of their monarch. Most would not have recognized him had they encountered him, as images of the king were scarce. Nevertheless, the realistic figure would have portrayed the individual within the coffin, adorned in Henry's robes and capturing his likeness with precision. Henry in the effigy presents a stark contrast, appearing unwell and haggard, unlike the various paintings which depict him with longer flowing hair and a vibrant complexion. After the passing of Henry VII, a new portrayal emerged. A bust crafted by Torregiano, showcasing the king adorned in a fair-lined gown and a black Tudor-style cap. He seems to be deep in thought, though he looks to be in improved health. It is believed that the bust was crafted from the death mask and effigy. With this death mask, he endeavored to render the monarch more vibrant and animated, capturing him in his youth and moments of grandeur. This bust is believed to have acted as a prototype or initial model for the bronze tomb effigy that would eventually be placed at his final resting spot in Westminster Abbey. Henry VII, as king, was recognized for his skill in restoring order to the realm after the tumultuous Wars of the Roses. His union with Elizabeth of York united the nation following the tumult of the recent Civil War, and he approached numerous conflicts with earnestness. He placed his trust in justices of the peace to maintain order on his behalf, yet his later years were overshadowed by worry, sorrow, and turmoil. The life of Henry VII was profoundly shaken by the passing of his heir and eldest son, Arthur, alongside the loss of his wife, Elizabeth of York. The man, renowned for his stoic demeanor and unwavering resolve, found himself profoundly impacted by these tragedies. After the passing of Elizabeth, his health began to decline, ultimately leading to his demise from tuberculosis. Mary, Queen of Scots. In a chilling moment of history, Elizabeth I sealed the fate of Mary, Queen of Scots by signing her death warrant, marking one of the most dreadful executions of the Tudor era. The former Scottish monarch, a cousin of the English Queen, became a focal point of conflict for Elizabeth as she found herself entangled in various conspiracies. Mary, Queen of Scots, found herself confined in England for almost 20 years prior to her entanglement in the Babington plot, a scheme designed to overthrow and assassinate Elizabeth, thereby placing the former Scottish Queen upon the English throne. Throughout the nation, many Catholics would have appreciated this. Yet, in time, Elizabeth gave her approval for the execution and murder of Mary. On February 8, 1587, Mary made her way into the confines of Fotheringhay Castle, where she approached the executioner's block. In a pivotal chapter of English history, the Queen commanded the execution of another queen, yet Mary's fate was sealed by the swift descent of the executioner's axe. Yet, a perplexing enigma has surfaced in the years following her tragic demise, revolving around several death masks crafted from the face of the Queen after her execution. Mary would not receive a public funeral. Instead, a death mask would be created for her. This photograph of the late former Queen of Scotland evokes a sense of unease, yet beckons us to uncover the story that lies beneath its surface. On the evening of February 7, 1587, Mary received the grim news that her execution was scheduled for the following morning. In her final hours, she devoted herself to prayer and carefully composed her will. Amid the unfolding events, within the grand hall of Fotheringhay Castle, a scaffold was being constructed and draped in dark fabric. It was not expansive, and a couple of steps led up to it. A cushion was provided for the Queen to kneel upon. 3 stools were positioned for witnesses to observe the proceedings. An executioner known as Bull was set to take the head of the former Scottish monarch. In a moment of desperation, he implored the Queen for her forgiveness, but Mary told him she forgave him with all her heart and hoped he would put an end to all her troubles. Mary found herself in the company of 2 devoted servants and ladies who gracefully aided her in shedding her outer garments. Jane Kennedy carefully blindfolded Mary, draping a white fabric over her eyes before gently resting her head on the low block. With outstretched arms, Mary guided the executioner and his assistant, a silent signal that the axe was poised to descend. However, the execution of Mary did not unfold as intended, and it was, in essence, mishandled. The initial strike of the axe failed to connect with her neck, resulting in the weapon becoming lodged in the back of her head. This would have been a torment, potentially sufficient to bring about the demise of the former Queen of Scotland all by itself. It remains uncertain if the executioner, recognized for his skill, experienced fear, or faltered in the final moments. Nonetheless, the event was characterized as a grave affair, with the executioner adhering to all the protocols of a prestigious execution of that time. After the initial strike missed its mark, the subsequent blow found its target with greater precision, and the axe came perilously close to decapitating her, leaving her head hanging by a slender thread of sinew. The executioner then thrust his axe blade forward and back repeatedly, resulting in Mary, Queen of Scots' head, tumbling onto the wooden scaffold below the block. In the aftermath, the executioner seized her head and proclaimed, "God save the Queen." At that moment, the auburn wig she wore slipped away, and Mary's head tumbled to the ground, unveiling her short grey hair at the time of her demise. A witness recounted that for a quarter of an hour, Mary's lips moved rhythmically after her head was severed. When the axe fell for the second time, a small dog belonging to Mary appeared from beneath her skirt. In the wake of Mary, Queen of Scots' execution, a remarkable series of events unfolded. Elizabeth I conveyed her sentiments regarding the events, feeling both profound sorrow and intense anger at the loss of life. She believed that her private counsel had taken precedence in the hierarchy. However, due to her grief and distress, Elizabeth would initially be reluctant to lay her former cousin to rest. In the moments that followed her execution, the authorities exercised great caution to ensure that Mary, Queen of Scots' dress, possessions, and belongings were not regarded as relics. To discourage relic hunters, everything within the grand hall of gathered hay that had touched her blood was consigned to the flames of the fireplace, including the scaffold itself. Her garments, alongside the executioner's block, were cast into the roaring flames of the great hall's fireplace. The presence of the executioner's axe remains uncertain, yet it seems plausible that he was allowed to retain it as his reliable instrument. Mary, Queen of Scots, had envisioned a resting place beside her first husband in France, yet this wish was ultimately denied. As a result of this, after her passing, her body underwent embalming and was secured in a protective lead casket until her burial several months later at Peterborough Cathedral in July 1587. The uncertainty looms over whether Mary's head was reattached to her body or not. In certain royal executions, like that of Charles I, the moment of the axe's descent marked the end, yet the head was subsequently reattached before the final resting place was reached. It is believed that her death mask was positioned upon her face during her time at Fotheringhay Castle. In the years following her execution, a range of death masks associated with Mary emerged, reflecting a practice that was customary among kings and queens of that era. After her passing, it is believed that 4 death masks were created from her likeness. 2 of these remain and are currently visible. The death masks present a captivating portrayal of the executed Queen of Scotland's face, evoking a sense of intrigue. She is portrayed with a serene and tranquil demeanor, revealing no signs of trauma, fear, suffering, or concern. Her eyes stay shut, her lips are firmly pressed together, and her face seems to be in a state of slumber. One of the Queen's death masks, referred to as the Lennox Love Mask, was in the possession of the Duke of Hamilton and resided at their estate in Lennox Love for almost 250 years. Within a casket, there lay not only the item, but also a collection of Mary's cherished belongings. In addition to the death mask, the casket held a sapphire ring and letters that accompanied it. For countless years, the death mask remained hidden from public view, yet it is now accessible for all to see. The Jedburgh mask stands as the other surviving death masks of Mary, Queen of Scots. The initial discovery took place in Peterborough, where she was first laid to rest before her relocation to Westminster Abbey. It is intriguing to note that the 2 death masks exhibit distinct differences in their appearance. Had the death masks been cast simultaneously within the confines of Fotheringhay Castle, they would have seemed indistinguishable from one another. Her facial expression remained utterly unchanged. The Lennox Love Mask presents a simpler and more compact design, whereas the Jedburgh mask features intricate painting and embellishments, giving the impression that Mary was adorned with makeup at the time of her death. A wig is also attached to it. The Jedburgh mask, alongside various artifacts and documents related to Mary, Queen of Scots, is showcased at her residence in Jedburgh. This location is believed to be where she stayed while en route to meet James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. In a fascinating turn of events, a watch that once belonged to the Queen is currently on display, having been unearthed from both a bog and a molehill. The original appearance of the Jedburgh death mask would have been a simple white. In Peterborough, Dr. Charles Hepburn of Glasgow made a remarkable discovery, asserting it was hand-printed. Today, the authenticity of the death masks is under scrutiny. Had the death masks been authentic, they would have been created soon after the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Before the casket containing her remains was sealed, the preparations would have been completed, allowing her to be laid to rest in a room at Fotheringhay Castle for several months. It is said that 4 death masks exist, with 2 having vanished into the annals of history, possibly residing within a Scottish household or with an earl. The surviving death masks present a striking contrast, each portraying a haunting likeness of Mary, Queen of Scots, just moments after her execution, mere seconds after her head was brutally severed by an inept executioner. Yet they portray her in a tranquil state, which contrasts sharply with her last moments. Elizabeth I. Elizabeth I, the Tudor queen admired by her father, Henry VIII stands as one of the most influential and courageous monarchs to have ever ruled England. Throughout her life, Elizabeth faced a multitude of challenges. She grappled with concerns about her strength as a queen in a male-dominated world, while also confronting the formidable threat of the Spanish Armada, which she managed to repel and overcome with remarkable success. Throughout her reign, she carried out the execution of many religious dissenters, and notably, she also ordered the execution of her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, who had conspired against her life and her rule. Yet, in her final months, Elizabeth had become but a shadow of the vibrant person she once was. Portraits depicted her as a figure of strength and stature, exuding an air of control over her surroundings. Yet her last days unfolded in a starkly contrasting manner. After her passing, a death mask was crafted of her face, capturing the Queen's haunting expression, reflecting the considerable pain she endured in her final moments. Elizabeth I's reign spanned approximately 45 years, marking her as the final monarch of the Tudor dynasty, as she passed away without leaving any heirs. Her reign unfolded as a golden age, marked by the brilliance of playwrights like Shakespeare, who crafted remarkable works and brought them to life on the stages of London. Yet, as time passed, the Queen's health began to wane, and the shadows of loss crept in. As her cherished companions departed from this world, Elizabeth I often found herself engulfed in waves of sorrow as she witnessed the aging and passing of some of her dearest female companions, who had stood by her side for many years. In 1590, Blanche Parry, a cherished companion of the Queen, passed away. Blanche had been acquainted with the Queen since her days as a princess, serving as the principal gentlewoman of the Privy Chamber and the custodian of the Queen's treasures. Elizabeth was profoundly affected by the loss of Blanche, yet in 1598 she faced the passing of another dear companion, William Cecil, her trusted advisor. Cecil had stood by the Queen for decades, and as she saw her loyal allies fade away, Elizabeth started to retreat, growing more and more isolated. She wandered away from the court she had once ruled, becoming distant from it. In her final years, she would carry out the execution of Robert Devereux, Earl of Essex. Devereux stood out among her favorites despite his conviction for high treason due to his involvement in orchestrating an uprising aimed at capturing the Queen. In January 1603, Elizabeth I found herself in a state of declining health. In her profound despair, she sought solace at Richmond Palace, a place she cherished dearly. She concluded that Richmond was the perfect setting for her retirement, and she spent her last months there surrounded by her loyal companions. She turned down food and drink during her stay, leading to significant weight loss that worried the women around her. Despite their requests, Elizabeth declined to have the doctors examine her. It would bring her sorrow to discover that Catherine Howard, the Countess of Nottingham, had departed from this world. After nearly 45 years of service to Elizabeth, it seemed that this was the breaking point for her. The Queen was said to have held the Countess in great affection, mourning her loss deeply, and ever since, she seemed to be enveloped in sorrow. Though she was frail and nearing 70, her spirit was unyielding, and she held the reins of her life firmly. She remained steadfast, not taking breaks and standing for prolonged stretches. It was believed that she was mentally bracing herself for the inevitable end, and in those last days, she grew increasingly contemplative and burdened by guilt. She felt a deep concern for Mary, Queen of Scots' execution, and it was said that she shed many tears and sighed, expressing her innocence and asserting she had never agreed to the Queen's demise. Elizabeth started to experience haunting visions of Mary, and it became clear that her time was running out. Her health was waning, and with it, her intellect. She made the decision to retreat to her bed. She called upon the Archbishop of Canterbury to join her, seeking prayers for her soul. He reassured Elizabeth I that she would ascend to heaven and reign as a queen there. On March 24, 1603, the Queen passed away, and her remains were conveyed from Richmond to Whitehall Palace, where they were examined for a duration of 3 weeks. Yet, following her passing, the death mask of the last Tudor Queen was taken away. In the wake of her passing, a multitude of concerns lingered, particularly regarding the succession of the King of Scotland, who had received an invitation to govern England as well. Nevertheless, a cast of her face was created, and what is intriguing is that it presents the Queen in a completely different manner than the images captured during her lifetime. The image portrayed an aging queen concealing her true self behind a mask of youth, with the design of her tomb drawing inspiration from the death mask of Queen Elizabeth I. She wore a contemplative expression, and her effigy would be complete with the addition of her ruff and jewelry. During that time, it was common for people to pilfer the death masks of notable figures. utilizing them to create funeral effigies within tombs and to act as a tribute to the departed. Elizabeth I was portrayed as appearing quite aged, a representation that would have been fitting considering her last moments. Today, the Grand Tomb in Westminster Abbey, inspired by her death mask, stands as a monumental tribute, showcasing the Queen adorned with a crown and headpiece, a testament to her significance and affluence. Elizabeth I faced the possibility of death from numerous illnesses or ailments, one of which was blood poisoning. This condition is believed to have resulted from the lead cosmetics she used to hide her smallpox scars, a source of great self-consciousness for her. Another theory suggests that the Queen may have suffered from cancer, or perhaps an infection that advanced to pneumonia, ultimately leading to her demise due to her age and compromised immune system. The Queen underwent embalming, and it is probable that the death mask was crafted concurrently. The individuals who undertook this procedure, including physicians, would have ensured that the Queen seemed serene and tranquil in her final moments, which is how the death mask would have been created. Today, Elizabeth I rests in Westminster Abbey, her body initially laid to rest in a vault by her grandfather, King Henry VII. Yet it was James I who commanded the construction of a grand monument and tomb, where she was ultimately interred, alongside her half-sister in the same vault. Elizabeth held a prominent position above Mary I, signifying her significance in history. Her tomb bears the inscription, "Consorts in realm and tomb, here we sleep, Elizabeth and Mary, sisters in hope of resurrection." While many mourned her passing, others held lofty hopes for King James I. However, these expectations would diminish over the years, and within a mere 15 years of her death, Elizabeth had come to be regarded as a heroic figure in the society of her time. Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, recognized as the Empress of India, stands as one of Britain's longest reigning monarchs. She passed away on January 22, 1901, at the age of 81, in the rooms of Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, her cherished residence. However, following her death, a considerable amount of turmoil ensued, as there was uncertainty regarding the arrangements for her funeral. Yet an air of mystery enveloped her passing, as Victoria's physician clandestinely concealed several items within her coffin, convinced that the revelation of her final wishes would provoke disapproval from the royal family. Yet there was one desire of the Queen that was astonishingly overlooked: the choice to create a death mask of Victoria. This was something she did not wish for, but it was pursued by the powerful and eventually warlike Kaiser Wilhelm II, her grandson. Yet it unveils a chilling and disquieting perspective. By the end of the year 1900, Victoria was clearly unwell and showing signs of illness. She faced a challenging year, marked by her eldest daughter's battle with aggressive breast cancer and the loss of several family members to different ailments. She had shed a significant amount of weight, and her eating habits had changed drastically. She was an elderly woman in her 80s, a significant age for that era, and she was often seen being transported in a wheelchair. Yet Victoria found herself enveloped in confusion. She penned in her diary that as another year commenced, she felt so weak and unwell that she approached it with a heavy heart. Victoria found herself within the walls of her beloved Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, a place that had hosted countless Christmases. However, as time passed, her health began to decline, prompting the royal doctors to call for the royal family to gather at the Isle of Wight, for the situation appeared grave. In her final days, she found herself enveloped in a haze of confusion, while her daughters remained blissfully unaware of the impending fate. They held on to the belief that the Queen was destined to endure eternally. Even Kaiser Wilhelm II, the German emperor, was called upon to pay his respects and bid farewell. The British newspapers soon became aware of the unfolding events, leading them to speculate and subsequently report on the happenings within the palace walls. The media was calling and reaching out every single day. At the Queen's bedside, the Bishop of Winchester and a local priest were called upon to offer prayers for her soul, their voices rising in chant and hymn, while doctors remained at her side, providing words of comfort and reassurance. The Queen had endured several serious strokes, rendering her unable to fulfill her responsibilities because of her condition. Yet the royal family was in tears, seemingly aware that death loomed near. Their understanding deepened as they were summoned into the bedroom, one after another, to bid their final farewell at 6:30 on the evening of January 22, 1901. In the quiet confines of her small bedroom, Queen Victoria passed away at the age of 81. The news of her passing echoed around the world, reaching distant shores long before Edward VII took the throne. The somber tolling of the bells at St. Paul's Cathedral resonated through the air, echoed by the chimes of all nearby churches, while shop windows were shrouded in black mourning cloth, a poignant tribute to the occasion. Yet, within the walls of the Osborne mansion, a deeper layer of confusion unfolded, as none possessed the knowledge required to orchestrate a complete military state funeral. Nevertheless, Victoria had provided numerous clear instructions regarding what was to be done and what was not to be done with her body and remains upon her passing. She was filled with dread at the thought of being sliced open, and the very idea of her internal organs being removed or scattered in different boxes and places was unbearable. During the embalming process, a death mask was created of Queen Victoria's face, presenting an image that is neither pleasing nor particularly flattering for the long-reigning queen. Queen Victoria held a strong aversion to death masks, viewing them as horrific and disturbing. As a result, she chose not to have a single cast of her husband, Prince Albert, opting instead for a plaster cast of his hand. Victoria made it abundantly clear that she wished to avoid the creation of a death mask in her likeness. She desired to be remembered as the Empress of India and the Queen of Britain, a figure of power and strength, rather than as a woman who had withered, aged, and endured hardships in her final years. Amid the turmoil of arranging her funeral and transferring her remains to London and beyond, Kaiser Wilhelm II instructed the royal doctors to craft a death mask for his grandmother. The Earl Marshal and the Lord Chamberlain engaged in a fierce dispute over the design of the funeral, their inability to come to an agreement leading to a series of complications on the day of the ceremony. Yet Kaiser Wilhelm II proceeded to have the death mask made, despite Victoria's wishes to the contrary. Upon the moment of death, masks were often crafted, serving to forge tombs, effigies of the departed, and in some instances, statues designed to eternalize significant figures in history. Yet, it seems that Kaiser Wilhelm's orders were executed in the immediate aftermath of her passing, during the embalming process, a time when only a handful of individuals were present, including the royal family, who would have recognized that this was not in accordance with her wishes. Though they might have raised their voices in protest, several members of the royal family subsequently conveyed their discontent with Wilhelm's demands, feeling that they undermined the Queen's true intentions. The mask presents a rather chilling portrait, as the Queen's eyes and lips are entirely sealed, resulting in an unappealing and uninviting appearance. Victoria had not envisioned this as her legacy, yet Kaiser Wilhelm might have carried the death mask back to Germany, becoming a significant factor in the events leading to World War I. Further complications emerged regarding the planning and preparations of Queen Victoria's funeral, as the royal undertakers dispatched to the Isle of Wight inadvertently left her casket in London. For decades the coffin lay in wait, but a local carpenter received an urgent summons to swiftly craft a final resting place for Queen Victoria. The burial procession unfolded with grandeur, as battleships and Royal Navy boats accompanied the Alberta, her yacht, which carried her coffin, across the Solent. In a poignant turn of events, as the funeral reached its final stage, the gun carriage bearing Victoria unexpectedly broke away, rolling uncontrollably. This unforeseen incident led to a struggle, compelling sailors to exert their strength and pull it by hand. Yet, the death mask of Queen Victoria presents a haunting image of her in her last moments. She wished to be remembered as the queen who oversaw remarkable transformation during her long reign as Britain transitioned into an industrialized nation, rather than as the frail old woman depicted in every newspaper. Though her grandson's proposal was typical within German circles, it clashed with British customs and contradicted the Queen's desires. It was remarkably focused on appearances. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and let us know in the comments what you think. Check out our other videos and subscribe to be part of the fun. Click on the notification icon so you can see our new videos as soon as they're uploaded. Thanks for watching and see you next time.